In STEM is a holistic mentorship and skills development program. We invite you to bring your whole selves into this virtual learning space. So before I turn it over to the experts, let's pause for a moment of mindfulness.
My name is Karen Andrade. I work at I'm a civic science fellow at the Science Philanthropy Alliance, which is a nonprofit in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Honestly, I did not think about authenticity for a very long time as something very important. It particularly started coming into my world about a year ago, when I was at a career fair. And the main speaker, one of these big, I was at Stanford. I was a postdoc at Stanford, and the main speaker of the event kept on telling us about showing up authentically. And to be totally honest with you, it made me kind of mad, because I felt that it was easy for this very successful white woman to be up in the stage and saying oh yeah, show up authentically. But what I thought to myself was, well, the thing is that your position, your identity makes it so that you can show up authentically wherever you go and there's no questions, right? But when I show up authentically, I often get pushback. I often make, to me, what my authentic self is sometimes makes people uncomfortable. So I've been thinking a lot about this notion of authenticity, in particular because I grew up in this low income neighborhood in Mexico City. And I went to school in a very affluent community. So then showing up authentically for me was a liability. It wasn't something that it was a survival strategy to not show up authentically. I think that why is it important for me? It has been because it really is a way of owning myself again and who I am and the full extent of my history, both the challenges I've faced, but also the victories I've achieved. And it also is about, to be totally honest, it has also been about, there's this relief in stopping the code switching, right? There's this relief in this openness that comes, and this freedom that comes from letting go of the layers of expectations, doing it in a way that owns who I am, but also opens up a dialogue, right? It opens up a dialogue for people to not push back against me, but actually opens them up to learning about me and about the different circumstances that I grew up in. I saw this woman, Rochelle Burks, who gives a great talk, and with her raw emotion and with her experience of being an African-American woman in STEM, just really showed me that in a sense, yes, when people ask for authenticity, it is asking for more than what people realize. Like showing up and turning up that brightness, even though it might make some people uncomfortable, is something that also some people really want, and that I really want, right? And that if we don't show up, if we don't actually put that out there, then we keep on buying into these systems of white supremacy, right? And so I was like, you're right. I will do the effort, and I will do the work, and I will face the fears and I'm still working on it. But I definitely done the commitment, which a year ago I would have been like, oh heck no. And it still sounds scary, but I'm committed to making it happen more and more every day. To me, the first step was naming that I was code switching. naming the how I have bought into it and actively participate in keeping myself small, right? And invisible, right? Like how I do choose. I did choose, and I still sometimes choose to code switch, and to also to say that's okay, right? Like to understand why, right? And to give myself to basically to see it. And it is true, right? Like the mask that we've had to create to move among, like specifically science, the mask that system demands that you use is part of, it's been created by you, right? And society, right? But it's also one that is ultimately hurting us, right? It's hurting me, it's hurting it's hurting you, it's hurting us, because we're molding to that system, right? We're molding ourselves to that system of white supremacy. So the first step was recognizing that, like seeing what was I doing, and then really just like, feeling that sadness of like, wow, like, but then also that relief, like to imagine what it would be to not have to code switch, like to imagine what it would have to be to talk openly about the lessons that I learned, like growing up in like a very, low income neighborhood, and use those not as something to be hidden, but something to be proud of, right? Like that's a completely different shape frame, and this is coming from someone that, I've benefited from like a million fellowships and scholarships. So it's not that I'm not aware of the narrative of how living in this, growing up in this difficult circumstances has been an achievement. It's not that I don't know it. I've known the narrative, but it's about really sitting. It was for me for really sitting and then truly starting to think like, this is something I need to be proud of. Like this is a story I need to own and uplift, right? This is a story that that does not deserve to be hidden, right? And then a second step, I guess, for sure, it was, hearing that from the mentor, like surrounding myself with mentors and with people that were really supportive, and that gave me a supportive community to do this in. It's okay that you cry. It's okay that that your emotion, that this is difficult. Like, it's okay that you point this out in other systems. And it's okay also that they feel uncomfortable. The short example is I was in the laboratory of this still very famous microbiologist. But I wanted to work on a project to bring community voice into UC Berkeley, because I was just thinking like, this is ridiculous that we are the premier public university in the world. And there's really no clear conduit for people that are not industry or people with a lot of influence to come and ask a research question to scientists. Basically, some people told me like, you're wasting your career by following that interest because you're in the lab of the super famous scientist, so you need to just capitalize on that. And I mean, ultimately, I was like, no, this is me. Like even though, yes, like I want to be a scientist and I did graduate with my PhD, I'm also going to carve something out of this experience that is mine. And even though I did face a bit of backlash, eventually people came along because that passion and that interest, and not only did it shine for other people, but it also emboldened me and to see what I was capable of. Like, and so it sort of connected me, I think, to that true self that I guess I've been searching for. I think that the moments where I would say like when something is really toxic is when somebody is completely undermining your value as a human or trying to sell to you a vision of yourself that you just know is not true. It is true that the system of STEM and the particular academia is very interested in just replicating a model, right? And I think there's a big problem in that. So I went to universities that are predominantly diverse, but predominantly white, and I think that what the model is demand is very specific, and the problem is, of course, is that they, like, a lot of these diversity pipeline kind of systems, which I benefited a lot from, I will clearly state, and they bring you in with and you with celebrating your difference and saying, oh, that's so wonderful that you are a rectangle or a circle. But now that you're here, you have to be a square. And any attempt to not be a square will be pushed against. I wish I would have known that because I was like, the reason I came into the system, like, with the system celebrating my difference, and I even got scholarships because I was different. But then once I got there, there was a very clear push for me to just be a certain thing and want a certain thing. So if you didn't want to be just another microbiology professor, you were going to be in trouble, right? Like, because the whole system is really intended to replicate this one thing. I think it's slowly changing, but it's a huge ship to shift. I think being open-eyed about the challenges that you will be facing, I think would have really helped, and eventually did help me, because it also depersonalized it. Like, it wasn't my failure. It was really, even though it often felt like my failure, that I wasn't meeting these ridiculous standards that I wasn't even interested in meeting. And I eventually did meet them, just in my own way. I'm still understanding STEM and science as a social enterprise, right? Like, as a human enterprise with all of its goods and bads. Like, to be clear and open-eyed that science is not just a process for understanding knowledge, right? Science is a system. Science is a human enterprise, both that I think can bring humans at its best, but it also has humans at its worst. And that's, I think, one of the myths of science that makes it so hard. Like, even though science thinks and sells itself as a true meritocracy, it is not. And so to know that going in, before getting into the ring, I think really helps stop some of the punches and stop the blow. At least it does to me, because then I know that when I show up, I'm presumed incompetent, not because I am incompetent, but because the system just sees Mexican women as not belonging in that system. And so the bar for me to be accepted and for my ideas to be seen as valuable is just always going to be higher. And so I think knowing that, but also, as I said before, like, surrounding yourself with a community of support that sort of also tells you when you're being gaslit, right? That tells you, like, no, trust yourself. You're not crazy. Like, also, that's something that has been really important for me. Like, when people say, like, I'm like, am I being crazy? Like, am I imagining racism where it isn't? And so a community that tells you, no, you trust yourself. You are experiencing racism and sexism and all the other types of isms. You are experiencing that. Now, what are you going to do about it? Like, how are you going to move through these waters? But you first have to see the water. You can't just, assume that, like, the water is nice and warm and there to welcome you, because then it's harder. But because if you assume that, right, that the water is nice and warm and everybody's here and everybody's welcome and everybody's going to be assumed that, like, incompetent in the same way, then you start believing the problem is you, like, then the problem must be me, that I am incompetent. But no, it's not. So to me, that's how seeing the water clearly for the murkiness has helped me navigate that.
We hope you found this useful. For more videos in this series, please visit us at nationalmetals.org/InSTEM.